All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome in another episode of GC Live, South Carolina versus Kentucky preview today. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark, live from BP Skinner here in the heart of the Vista, 1003A on Gervais Street. As we always tell you, come on down, pick out your game day fit for this weekend and for the future, whether you got a wedding going on, a big event, anything in between, going to the game. Come down, ask Brent, ask Josh. They're going to take great care of you right here at BP Skinner in the Vista. As always, this show brought to you by our good buddy Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Also there, we've been telling them for years now, man, if you're in the market for a home, you want to go from rent to buy, you want to upgrade, you want to maybe you're retiring and you want to kind of downsize a little bit. Whatever it is, Clint is there to answer all your questions. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about interest rates, where are things going, where are they at right now, how much home can I afford? Sat down, had those very questions answered with Clint. For myself, you can do the same. Again, 422-6797. That's area code 803.
All right, and we're also going to tell you about our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet, conveniently located just off I-26 between Columbia and Charleston. The folks over at Ferry Chevrolet are local, trustworthy, and always transparent. Business began all the way back in 1926, right here in the Palmetto State in St. Matthews. Right now located in Orangeburg, right between Columbia and Charleston, just off I-26. A business built on honesty, integrity, and a handshake. They still operate with those same principles to this day. So if you're a South Carolina fan out there who's interested in a new or used vehicle, make sure you check out our friends over at Ferry Chevrolet in Orangeburg, fourth-generation dealer in Joseph Ferry, family-owned business. Again, they've served the community since 1926. Head on over to ferrychevrolet.com today to check out their inventory and get in touch.
All right, we'll tell you later on about some more great sponsors here on GC Live. But, Chris, let's dive into football. South Carolina versus Kentucky, of course, coming up 7:45 Eastern time here right down the road at Williams-Brice Stadium. And we don't have to tell anybody listening on this show how important this game is for South Carolina. If you're a Gamecock fan, man, you know that at this point. And I think you look at this game, it feels a little different even than last week. I was looking at last week going, all right, win this game, and you're actually right back on pace. You're right back on track, especially if you see some good things. You kind of see some things you can build off of. There were some things you can build off of, but starting 0-2 in the SEC – realistically, I do think that means you have to kind of go ahead and shift your expectations a little bit. For me right now, it's just if you're South Carolina going into this bye week, forget about, all the stuff we were all talking about during the preseason and just get back to trying to play some good ball. And if this season is going to be salvaged, and I know it's very early to be saying those words, it almost has to involve a win this weekend. When you look at the SEC pecking order, I know we don't know a ton about this Kentucky team yet, but, man, look, we do know something about some of those other teams on the schedule. So, to me, you just have to find a way to win this game.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page in that we don't love the whole must-win term, and it's not a must-win in some regards, but it makes the path a lot more difficult if you want to go out and have a strong season in 2025, if you start SEC play 0-3, if you've got 3 straight losses, if you've got 2 home night losses at Williams-Brice Stadium. And, Wes, we got to remember, schedules are situated in different ways. Certainly last year, Carolina had some very challenging games up in the front part of the schedule, but they had a lot of challenging games in the back half of the schedule. This year, I think people came in to these first 5 games before the bye week really hoping, I would dare say some people may be expecting to be 5-0, 4-1 at the worst, right? I think people kind of chalked up, hey, Missouri on the road, that'll be a tough game. Maybe that's your 50-50 kind of swing game. Instead, you do lose that game. And the tough one, of course, I think, but both of those losses were tough. But the one at Vandy at night at home, or against Vandy at home, really the toughest pill to swallow. Even though I think that's a pretty good Vandy team, you are definitely behind the 8 ball right now. So when you're looking at these first 5 games, you're not going to go 4-1 anymore. You're not going to go 5-0 anymore. Can you salvage this first part, go hit the bye week, Can you play better ball this week while getting a win that gives you something to build on going into the back half of the schedule?
Yeah, for sure. And, I agree. I think Vandy is a pretty good team. Missouri, pretty good team. But here's the fact of the matter. All your opponents in the SEC this year are going to be pretty good teams.
Pretty good to really good.
If you were looking at this team thinking, hey, take the next step, you're going, you can beat most of the pretty good teams. And right now, we obviously have not seen that yet. And, yeah, I always look at things like, all right, in this stretch, knowing, hey, the ball may bounce your way, the ball may not bounce your way. Can you win? Like in that stretch of 3 games, Vandy, Missouri, Kentucky, I was going, yeah, you could win them all. But realistically, can you take 2 out of 3 in that stretch? And then when you got to that super tough stretch involving, the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Ole Misses, Oklahoma, A&M, throwing Clemson, to me it was like, all right, if you hold serve during this first stretch, it's more of like a split situation. Like, can you split those games moving forward? And you were going with the way the college football playoff sets up, with your strength of schedule, you're going to have a shot to reach all your goals this year. Again, I think you got to throw that away right now. Can you find some things to build off of going into this bye week? And I tell you what, man, it was interesting to me listening to Beamer speak earlier this week. We're going to get to some Kentucky specific things, but I think there's some more meat on the bone just for South Carolina and their perspective of this. Lenora Sellers, were there some balls he would want back, some decisions he would want back from that game? There were a few. Yes, there were. Going back, rewatching that game a little bit, man, I actually came away with a little bit more of an appreciation for some of the big plays that Sellers did make in this game. Some of the, I would say, progression in the pocket in terms of when he did step up into the pocket, reset his feet, allow himself to keep his eyes down the field and make some plays. Now, I think he needs to do that at a little bit more consistent level. We saw him bailing out. How much of the issues with sacks? Yes, a lot of it is on the offensive line. I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
But how much has it been amplified by some of that decision-making? Even, you have a mobile quarterback, man, it's a give and take. He can take you out of some sack situations. He can put you into some as well. Those tackles going up against, I think, 2 freaking stud edge rushers for Missouri, when you drift back, the speed those guys have, I mean, tackles love when the quarterback drifts way back because that just gives them a much better angle to your quarterback. Whereas if you even give up a little bit of initial pressure, but that quarterback kind of steps up into the pocket, you can almost make them overrun the QB. So I think there are some things right now. You look at the number of pressure situations that have resulted in sacks for South Carolina. That is a very high percentage. So to me, that goes back to that thing that nobody likes talking about, and that's the kind of, hey, everybody can improve. Every part of this can get better, and it's going to have to if you're going to be able to consistently do the things South Carolina wants to do. And that's not even to get into the lack of running game this past week. Going back to what I said off top, yes, there are some things to improve on, but there were some big boy NFL throws in this game from Lenora Sellers. We heard Beamer even come out and say on Tuesday, like, hey, we have to double down on what we do well right now. And not every opponent will be the same, but right now it's these wide receivers that are coming on. It's Sellers and his ability in the passing game. I feel like you could feel the confidence continue to grow in terms of that. Can you do that against the Kentucky back seven and certainly Kentucky secondary? Chris, much like Missouri, they do have some question marks there. We'll hear, we hope, we've got an interview with Justin Rowland. We're going to try to roll that the middle of this show. I think that's where you're living again. Like that's what I'm watching for on Saturday. Can you get Sellers going again in the passing game, get those receivers going again, and exploit a Kentucky secondary that could have some holes?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what you said, finding some things you can build on. The passing game, while there were some notable misses, right, the ball to Mazio Bennett. You and I were rewatching that this morning again. The ball to Dre Jacobs that Dre said after the game, I should have come down with that ball. Slight hesitation coming into that dig route, right? just near misses, but also hit some huge plays in the passing game. Missouri at times didn't have answers, Wes. I mean, they missed a couple big plays, more than a couple big plays. They hit some big plays. And I think Mike Shula pointed out during his press conference on Wednesday, you could tell throughout the game that Missouri was very much keyed into not letting Lenore Sellers beat. Hey, if he beats us through the air, so be it. I don't think they wanted it to be that extreme. Eli Drinkwitz was ticked off after that game, head coach of Missouri, about how many passing yards they gave up, how many big plays. But that was encouraging, right? If you're talking about play calling and scheme, yeah, Missouri busted a bunch of coverages. They busted a bunch of coverages because, from what I saw, South Carolina did a good job scheming some stuff up. Lenore Sellers made some big-time throws. The receivers made some big-time catches. That's something you can build on. Now, I do think, does this thing flip in some ways as it goes? Do teams start saying, okay, we got to be a little bit more keenly aware of South Carolina's downfield passing attack and dare them to run the ball a little bit more because they haven't had a lot of success there? Maybe so. I think that'll be an interesting kind of chess match from game to game starting this weekend. But, man, for Carolina, I think one of the problems you're seeing is even when they've hit some big explosive plays in the passing game, a lot of them are coming in situations where kind of unmanageable down and distance normally, some big plays on a 3rd and 12, a 3rd and long. You don't want to be living there. It's great when you can make those plays. I think that for an offensive line that's had some struggles and for a quarterback that's had a lot of pressure on him to go make big plays in bad situations, typically unmanageable situations, when you can't run the ball and you're in 2nd and long where it's hard to run the ball, and then you're in 3rd and long where you can't run the ball and you got to pass, I think defenses, those defensive ends from Missouri, other ones here in the future that they'll be facing, they can just tee off, right? And that puts even more pressure on a line that's been struggling. So that's a long-winded way of me saying South Carolina has got to find some solutions in the run game somehow.
Yeah, and I think this is a new-look Kentucky team at, I feel like, almost every level compared to what we saw last year from them. And they at least feel like they have filled some holes pretty well on the defensive line. Linebacker, we'll see. Those Stoops really, really good defenses. I feel like they always have that big defensive tackle, like nose tackle in the very middle. They normally have a pass rush guy or two, and they typically have some big linebackers that can run as well. Do they have that this year? They have struggled a little bit on the back end as well. I look, and knowing how Stoops likes to coach, knowing what their general approach has been, and knowing that they may have some questions back there to try to cover up, and seeing what South Carolina did last week down the field, I think the area you're going to have to exploit this week is going to be the intermediate areas. Some of those go balls we saw them hit where, and part of that is, hey, we've got an offside. Let's just take a shot. Like, I think that's every team should do that. If you have this opportunity, let's throw the ball down the field. They did that. And really, in some of those things, Missouri, scheme-wise, is in a good call, but the Carolina player just ran by them and just made a better play on the football.
Yep.
So that was good to see from a South Carolina standpoint, bad to see from a Missouri standpoint. From a big picture standpoint, it's okay, is every team going to allow you to do that? If you're Kentucky and you're trying to take away certain things, and the more I watch opponents' linebackers, man, there's been a lot of zone against Lenore Sellers, but the linebackers have been not necessarily dropping back deep into coverage. They almost are in a trigger against the run and spy against the pass situation, all eyes on Sellers. So I think we saw success in the play-action passing game, even without the success running the football. Some of that is because teams are just going, hey, we're going to take all this away from you. That area right behind where the linebackers kind of vacate, and then depending on what coverage you're in, which zone coverage you're in, some of the throws just out to the perimeter, they should be there, I would think. And that is where, if you can live there, you eventually can get teams out of that. I mean, I think against some of these schemes we've seen, Steve Spurrier would have probably thrown the ball every down. Just say, like, forget the running game. Eventually, though, you are going to have to get back to running the football. And, man, I'll be curious to see how does that look this week. A lot of times in sports, we are very much sort of locked into what we just saw this past week. And we know the running game was essentially non-existent this past week, right? There was a little bit of room to run against Vanderbilt before Sellers went down. It changed the entire dynamic of the game. Against this Kentucky front, does it look more like what they were able to do against Vandy, or does it look more like what they did, which was not much, against Missouri? We may be sitting there going, hey, they found something in the running game. Some of that is going to be based on what you're facing on the other side, man. Like a lot of times we look at this team-centric as opposed to matchup-centric. So are they able to get a little bit more of that going this week? That would make life so much easier on everybody over there.
Well, and I think, a question that I continue to have, after the Vandy game, I wrote something laying out, here's Sellers' usage in the run game so far this year. Here's Sellers' usage in the run game last year. Designed runs, scrambles, all that. How do those compare? And at the time, I felt like we didn't really have enough data on that because SC State game, we're not going to relitigate it. You weren't going to run Sellers a ton. He played less than a half against Vandy. He didn't run a lot against Mizzou. Now, I will say the sample size that we had against Missouri, I think there were 2 to 3 maybe called runs in that game for him, 3, 4, 2 to 4, let's call it. There wasn't a lot of room to run, even for Lenore Sellers. I think you got to keep in mind, he was coming off of a week in which he got knocked out of the Vandy game, listed as questionable on the Wednesday initially before the game. My point is, was he 100%? We haven't been told. We haven't heard for sure. Did that factor in? The point I'm getting at, Wes, how much more is Sellers involved in the run game against Kentucky and going forward? I think teams are even playing South Carolina differently in the run game as a whole because they do have some zone read stuff. They do have to think about the fact that, okay, when South Carolina lines up, they could just run power with Lenore Sellers. I think we've seen a theme of teams devoting a lot to the front to trigger against the run. Now, is that the reason for South Carolina's lack of success? No, I'm not trying to say that. They've had plenty of other problems in the running game, specifically the blocking up front. But that has opened the door for South Carolina to have some success in the passing game. What can you scheme up and how can you get better execution-wise to be able to run the football? Not great, but even just average. I think that helps you a lot offensively.
Yeah, and there was not a lot of room to run. I know I'm not breaking news here last week, but if you go back and watch, there were at least a couple of plays that you can look back on and say the old thing that fans hate to hear, but coaches kind of live in because that's what they want to point to their guys. One more block here, one more block there, and you break one of those off, and it kind of does it loosen things up for you just a little bit. Do you find a rhythm? And speaking of rhythm, though, man, I think one of the most frustrating things, I'm sure, for the staff and for the players is when they have hit some big plays and they have tried to maybe go hurry up a little bit, and then you have a false start or the guy's not being lined up. Like you're trying to sort of put a little bit of pressure on the opponent, put them on their heels a little bit, and then boom, you're at 1st and 15. I feel like, for one, the defense takes a breath, they relax. Okay, we got them behind the sticks. Let's take advantage of this. If you're watching, think about this. If you're watching your team play defense and they're kind of struggling on a drive, and then you get that holding call on the other team, you're like, oh, here's an opportunity to get a stop. I'm sure the defense is thinking the same thing. So I don't know. It's just been so inefficient overall. Like, can you add in a little bit of efficiency to go along with all the big plays? We shall see. But again, football is a matchups game, and there are some things about this week that are going to be different, but then some things that I think are going to actually be very similar, at least in terms of what Kentucky tries to do to you.
Yep.
We will see if they can be as successful as a Missouri or a Vanderbilt was. But, Chris, I think this will be an excellent time. We're going to try – so we had Justin Rowland from Cats Illustrated on our 107.5 show earlier today. I'm going to try to play that right now. We're on the fly, obviously on location here at BP Skinner. So hang with us. There may be a technical difficulty on this, but I want to give it a shot. And if so, you'll be hearing him break down Kentucky to give kind of that Kentucky reporter view of what they have going on. So y'all just bear with me here for a second. We're going to try to play it.
Wildcats. Joining us now on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines is Justin Rowland from Cats Illustrated. Justin, appreciate you taking your time. How are we doing today, man?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. As we get set for this game this weekend, Kentucky's played one less game than Carolina. They are coming off a bye week. Two opponents in Toledo and Eastern Michigan that probably don't give you the best idea of what your team is, but a tightly contested game that Kentucky just came up short with against Ole Miss a couple weeks ago. 3 games in, what can you say confidently you know about this Wildcats team this year?
I think they did a pretty good job replacing players in the transfer portal. They have a couple of impact transfer defensive linemen, Myquise Humphrey-Grace and David Gusta, who are really good at getting penetration up front. The back 7 on the defense is probably not as strong as it has been at other times, but that front helps them out. And the big emphasis was to improve the running game. You know, it's hard for Mark Stoops to coach Mark Stoops football if you can't run the ball. And so they hit the transfer portal, brought in a couple of running backs who have been good. They brought in some offensive linemen who have been big upgrades. I would say that, they've done pretty much what you expected them to do. We expected it to be a close win against Toledo. That was the MAC favorite, and they won. We expected them to be competitive against Ole Miss at home, and we saw Arkansas was competitive against Ole Miss as well, but they didn't quite have enough, and then they did what they were supposed to do against Eastern Michigan. But, you know, I think people are just waiting until they get into the meat of this SEC schedule, and that really starts this week.
Hey, Justin, it's Wes. Appreciate you hopping on, man.
You got it.
Give us your scouting report, if you can, of Cutter Boley.
Yeah, so he's a pretty interesting quarterback. I mean, he had some prospect pedigree. He was a 4-star recruit, in-state kid. I honestly felt like I didn't obviously, share this with anybody at the time, but when you watch him play, it's like he would be a really good quarterback for Josh Heupel. You know, he's big. He's got a big arm. He throws an outstanding deep ball. He navigates the pocket better and climbs the pocket better than you would guess when you kind of first watch him. He gets the ball out pretty quick for a guy with with such a big frame. But he has a couple of times maybe trusted his arm too much. You see a lazy throw to the opposite sideline that should be a pick six, or maybe he doesn't see somebody in zone coverage. And so this game for Cutter, we know he can hit the deep ball, but it's going to be about managing situations. As an inexperienced quarterback on the road, can he keep them in favorable down and distance situations and avoid the negative plays? That's what it's going to be about for Cutter.
Justin, it's Chris. Thanks again for taking time, man. So you mentioned the run game earlier. Let's dive into these backs that Kentucky has brought in, and Seth McGowan, who Shane Beamer mentioned he was familiar with the other day, and Dowdell. Kind of, McGowan had a really nice game against Ole Miss. I think 93 yards, a couple touchdowns. What's kind of the 1-2 punch look like right there, and what are the strengths of these guys?
Yeah, in the spring, I thought maybe Jamarian Wilcox was going to be the guy. He was their leading rusher last year, and he gave them some juice, but he's had some off-field issues, and he's not in the picture. But McGowan has been great. I mean, he's a very herky-jerky runner. He's a lot of arms and legs in his running, so he's not stopping on a dime. There's a lot of movement going on, but he can beat a fast linebacker to the edge, and he can break tackles in the tackle box. So he can do a little bit of everything. He's running extremely hard. He's come into this year with a lot to prove. If you remember somebody like Ray Davis, who transferred to Kentucky from Vanderbilt for his senior season, you can tell he's just got a chip on his shoulders this year. And he's a much more explosive and really overall talented running back than Kentucky has had probably since Chris Rodriguez. So I think he's a top 10. He's a top 3 or 5 SEC rusher right now, and he'll be in the running for some small conference recognition at the end of the year at this rate.
Hey, Justin, it's Jack. Appreciate you joining us. It seems like Kentucky likes to use their tight ends a bit with Josh Gaddis and obviously Willie Rodriguez as well. From your perspective, how much have they actually incorporated the tight ends into their offense? Is it kind of a focal point in your eyes?
A huge amount. And here's the funny thing, and this is no knock, but Vince Morrow was a big name on the Kentucky staff for a long time. He went to Louisville this offseason to be in their program, general manager. But they never really used the tight ends a lot until this year. And it looks like offensive coordinator Bush Hamden is leaning heavily on Josh Caddis, who has made some really contested catches. He was known more as a blocker, just kind of like a powerful run-blocking extra lineman early in his career, and he's just shown great hands, and Willie Rodriguez is a matchup problem as well. I will say this. There's not a lot of margin for error in that tight end passing. There's been a lot of balls fit into tight windows and tight ends making great plays, and that's a positive. But some of that is also they were not able to replace Dane Key and Barry and Brown from the transfer portal. You know, if you're Kentucky, you're going to have a hard time replacing one of those guys as a wide receiver. You know, and they lost two difference makers, two needle movers who are go-to guys in Nebraska and LSU respectively this year. And they brought in like Troy Stellato from Clemson and Kendrick Law from Alabama and J.J. Hester from Oklahoma. But, you know, if a guy didn't have a breakout as a fifth-year senior at one of those football factories, what are the odds he's going to be a needle mover at Kentucky in a one-and-done kind of contract year? And we've seen that they just had to lean more on the tight ends this year.
Again, talking to Justin Rowland of Cats Illustrated here on the AAA Heating and Air phone lines, previewing the Kentucky Wildcats ahead of Saturday's matchup with South Carolina. You mentioned Bush Hamden there a moment ago, and I think it's interesting because we've had our own conversations plenty in the first couple weeks of the relationship between the fan base and Mike Shula to start the season. It seems like Kentucky fans are none too pleased with year number 2 of Bush Hamden and how things have started off so far. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. Well, there's been all kinds of problems. I mean, there's been problems getting the ball snapped coming out of a timeout, operational issues in the 2-minute offense trying to score before halftime. You know, when the passing game is what you would expect from a Mark Stoops passing game. You know, teams have a scarcity of time and attention and playbook retention and all these things. And Stoops wants to be able to run the ball, control the clock, set your defense up well with complementary football. And the passing game is simply kind of a victim of that. You probably have a similar dynamic at Iowa where the way that you build your team, the way that you want to construct to win, it's not going to be a perfectly balanced approach. And that just makes it hard to throw the ball at Kentucky. I feel like Liam Cohen, you know, taking off so much in the NFL right before Bush Hamden gets there probably shines the spotlight a little bit more on some of the deficiencies, because before that it was like, well, maybe Stoops is the issue and maybe it's not the offensive coordinator. I think Stoops is definitely a part of it, but you contrast what Cohen did with limited resources with Hamden, and it has definitely been a step down so far.
Justin, kind of a big picture type of question. How important is this game for Mark Stoops and the temperature around the fan base with, I mean, obviously that buyout's pretty big, but, like, I mean, this is a big year for Kentucky in that, like, if it's a bad year, I mean, I don't know. Like, how much does Kentucky need to win this game on Saturday just for Mark Stoops' sake?
You know, I talked to Chris about this for content on our site this week, and he talked about how the difficulty in talking about a must-win game. You know, in this day and age, what does it mean to be a must-win game when your coach has all the leverage with a $30 million buyout? And it's 75% of whatever is owed, so it'll go down a little bit after this year, down a little bit after that. But I think Kentucky fans are frustrated enough that even if they were to win a close game on the road at South Carolina, they would still be looking at the rest of the schedule and being like, okay, well, we still need to see a little bit more. But no doubt, given how the last couple of years have gone in conference play, if they are able to control the clock and play the way that Stoops wants to play and maybe win the kind of way they beat South Carolina a few years ago, then people would be interested in October at least.
Justin, got another one for you here on the defensive side of the ball. You know, you're talking about Mark Stoops and kind of the hallmarks of the offense and some of the struggles that they've had. Defensively, you know, that's been his calling card, right? He recruits to a certain style. He recruits to a certain body type. And he's had a lot of really good defenses there over the years. How does this one stack up? I mean, you mentioned the secondary maybe taking a step back, some of the guys they brought in up front, but is this kind of your typical Mark Stoops defense? What have you seen good and bad from that group so far?
The portal era has been a big test to the Mark Stoops approach at Kentucky, because it was a lot about culture and retention and development and strength training paying off after a guy's been in the program 2 or 3 years. And you don't get as much time to mold someone and put your stamp on what he's going to be as a football player this way. So it's a differently constructed defense. They typically lean heavily on their starters, and they went into this year saying, we're going to ask guys to go be great for 15 to 30 snaps instead of letting this guy play 80% of the snaps in the game. So they've been rotating a lot more guys in. There's not one pass rusher they're relying on. There's Sam Green and Cam Olds and Steven Souls, and they're all very different kind of pass rushers, strengths and weaknesses. They're not as big, like hulking big up front. You think about like Deion Walker last year and Trayvon Ribka. I always tell people the best thing Kentucky does under Mark Stoops is recruit to scheme on defense. They don't recruit guys that are as big and fast as Alabama or Georgia, but they get the guys who have that kind of size, and then they work on them for a couple of years. And key to what they do is stopping the run with a big front and then keeping everything in front on the back. They're not as big up front, but they probably get more of a pass rush organically. They really generate pretty good pass rush from every level of the defense with Brad White's blitz packages. But we've seen struggles in coverage. Against Ole Miss, they gave up over 100 yards just on hitches. And then they got beat on a hitch and go for a very long touchdown against Eastern Michigan. So it seems like they're covering up some questionable defensive back play, and that will definitely be a test this weekend if Sellers can extend plays.
Hey, Justin, about a minute and a half before we got a hard break. Give us maybe, if you can, a couple keys to victory here for either side that just will determine the game.
Yeah, Kentucky's hope is that South Carolina is a big play team that has struggled with efficiency, and if Kentucky leans heavily into the efficiency thing, then you can really see them kind of creating a kind of game that they're comfortable with, a game that they can control and they've won before. South Carolina, you're also dealing with a very inexperienced quarterback who has had a penchant for making bad decisions in Cutter Boley. So South Carolina needs to make it as much about Cutter Boley's got to beat us as possible, and Kentucky needs to take away the run game and just hope making South Carolina one-dimensional. Whatever happens there, Boley's inexperience or South Carolina one-dimensional, I think that's going to be who wins the game.
Last about 30 seconds here. How do Kentucky fans feel about Carolina being one of the annual opponents going forward?
I think they totally understand it. I mean, this is a series that has gone in. I think it's an interesting series because it's not like a natural rivalry, but you have two programs that South Carolina's been higher than Kentucky has been at their best, certainly. But they're kind of looking at each other like this is a game we need to win for us to be where we want to be in the SEC. And so, yeah, I think the way that it's gone in streaks and swings from one team to the next has kind of made it a little bit more bitter, too.
All right, welcome back in. That was Justin Rowland joining us earlier today on the game. Very good insight there from Justin, as always. And we always say, hey, you can read about the opponent with your Gamecock Central subscription there on 3. When it comes to Kentucky, you can actually read 2 sites, Cats Illustrated and KSR, both now a part of the On3/Rivals Network. You can go check those out on Gamecock Central. Again, shout out to him for providing some insight for us there. And Chris, let's go ahead. Let's tell everybody about a couple more of our great sponsors and a new sponsor. Dude, did you get your boots in the mail?
Ooh, those things are nice.
Front Workwear,
Yes.
New sponsor here on Gamecock Central. And I want to tell everybody how they can get their own pair with a little bit of a deal as they do. Bruntworkwear.com/GC. If you use that code GC, you're going to see it right there on your screen. If you use that code, you're actually going to get $10 off your first purchase there at Brunt Workwear. And, dude, I had never used Brunt Workwear before, but could not be more impressed. First of all, with just the way the shoe looked. Like, this is a very, very nice boot. And then very comfortable, no break-in time needed. You know, a lot of times you get a new shoe, you have to break it in. Not the case here. And so what founder Eric Gerard wanted to do is he grew up blue collar. He wanted to basically create a boot that was able to get back to its roots, didn't kind of go that direction of being too expensive, too professional looking, just a good, comfortable, solid work boot that is comfortable right out of the box. And they have done that with Brunt Workwear. So throughout the next few weeks, we're going to be telling you all about Brunt Workwear. We're going to be we're going to show them to them next time, so be on the lookout. We will have that available for you to check it out. And Chris, we're going to do, you know how when they do like a test drive for a car, and then they do like the long-term test drive? We're going to test drive these boots the next few weeks, and we're going to report back. But in the meantime, if you already want to check out what they got going on, again, bruntworkwear.com/GC will get you $10 off your purchase. And welcome to the GC Live family, to our friends at Brunt Workwear.
All right, also got to tell you about our friends over at Palmetto Golf and Belts. Brandon Cohn, longtime GamecockCentral.com member, always hanging out on the Insiders Forum. And our members over at Gamecock Central on the Insiders Forum absolutely are loving all of his products. He's just dropped some new belts. He just texted me the other night about them. Great products. Palmetto Golf and Belts can be found at palmettogolfing.com. If you're a golfer, it's a must check out because he's got the custom golf gloves, custom golf tees, custom golf towels, and the great needlepoint belts, all extremely well made, all more affordable than some of the other options that you're going to find out there online. He's actually going to be, Wes, he just told me today, out at the tailgates on Saturday, Gamecock Park, Fairgrounds. He's going to be walking around, showing off some of his products, talking with South Carolina fans. So if you see Brandon out there, of course, tell him you saw him on GC Live, and go check out some of his products. Of course, great stuff if you're a golfer. If you're not a golfer, great products for that golfer in your life. Belts, gloves, towels, tees, all kinds of different designs, the cross design, the Palmetto Moon and Tree, and the South Carolina Blue and Garnet. So check them out, palmettogolfing.com.
Might be a great Christmas present, potentially.
Wonderful Christmas present. Man, we're already like, we had the Thanksgiving sub at Firehouse today. So like, this thing's advancing rapidly.
Yes.
Here.
Yes. And by the way, I threw it in the comments there, the link to that Brunt Workwear deal. Check out what they got going on. Some awesome products there that we're going to be telling you a little bit more about as the season goes along. Chris, let's get back to it and then close in on some final thoughts and a final prediction, South Carolina versus Kentucky. And, there were some things that Justin said that, we already talked about a little bit. He gave us a little bit more depth to it. But I think on the other side, if we've been watching Stoops coach for a long time at this point, man. He's not going to change who he is, certainly not at this point. And they have two very, very good running backs. And they all saw the tape, I'm sure, from last week for South Carolina. So they also have a new quarterback. And this is a kid who he's kind of that big, traditional, tall, I don't want to say statue-like. He can move around a little bit, but he is a traditional quarterback, 6'4", 6'5", 200-plus pounds, just a big-framed kid. And going to be making his first career road start, first career SEC start. He has played a little bit. He started a couple of games. He got in against Texas last year. And he will throw the football down the field, but also you're going to have to live with probably some decision-making from a young guy. So, man, I got to think they are going to get back to their roots. They're going to try to play defense, of course, but this is a gut check game for South Carolina, second week in a row. But gut check in terms of your defense, you're going to be called out. They're going to put two tight ends on the field, I promise you. And they're going to say, we're going to try to take your soul, because that is what they are all about. You got two teams that desperately need a win. And when that happens, you double down on who you are. You're going to get these two backs, left, right, and up the middle all night long, I think. So can South Carolina answer that call and stop it, or slow it down, to be probably more precise? It has got to be a key to this thing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Kentucky seeing the tape of the Missouri game. South Carolina's seen their own tape from the Missouri game, and it's been a point of emphasis. I think they've doubled down on, hey, Clayton White talked about it. Some of the players talked about it. Hey, we have gotten back to, we need to double down on some of these fundamentals, make sure that we're understanding that, when you wrap, you're driving your feet, can't have as many missed tackles as we've seen in the first two SEC games, particularly against Missouri. Now, the good news, Wes, you're not facing Ahmad Hardy this week, who's been the best in the country at breaking tackles and one of the best backs. Eli Drinkwitz, I think probably rightfully so, pointed out, why's this guy not in the Heisman conversation? You look at his numbers, That's not far-fetched, at least right now. The bad news is what you just said. Kentucky's identity has always been to run the ball and play defense. They're going to try to get back to that. South Carolina's had some struggles. They've leaned on their tight ends. They're playing some receivers that are not Barian Brown and Dane Key. They've got a young quarterback going into his first road SEC start, So what does that mean? You're probably going to go try to run the ball and take your chances with that. Seth McGowan, Shane Beamer mentioned, he's familiar with him from his time at Oklahoma. Had a good game against Ole Miss. I think had just short of 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dante Dowdell, another transfer who I think came from Nebraska. Pretty good 1-2 punch there. So different skill sets. Justin, you just heard mention that McGowan, unique running style, but also a guy that can break tackles. So if you're South Carolina, certainly a key to that game.
Yeah, and you look at those two guys, man. Dowdell, good player, I think solid player. But, man, I look at McGowan. And right now, if you look at the yards per carry, Dowdell actually has done a little bit more. But a lot of that is because he had a 70-plus yard run. I look at McGowan. Not that I don't think anybody is Ahmad Hardy right now. Maybe in the country. Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, when he's healthy, I still think he might be the best, but I think Hardy is making a case. McGowan, though, close-ish. Like he can go break some tackles now. Like he has forced a lot of missed tackles this year, but both these guys are 215 pounds plus. Both of them are 6 foot plus. Like they are going to try to lean on you. Like they are going to try to wear you down. From a scheme standpoint, a couple of things I want to keep an eye on this week. One, do we see South Carolina try to rotate a little bit more? We shall see. Do we see them rotate up front a little bit more? And what is the status of our guy Luedecke? For him being questionable this week, a guy that I think we saw come along a little bit, and actually has been in spurts really good for South Carolina all year. Has created some penetration. Has been a guy who's gotten in the backfield. I wondered, and to me, this maybe depends on his health, though. Do we see a little bit more? You very subtly saw South Carolina go to basically kind of that 3-4 type personnel look late in the game against Missouri. They had all three of their kind of co-starters, I would call it, at defensive tackle on the field, along with 2 linebackers and the 2 edge guys. If Kentucky is going to get in that personnel with 2 tight ends, do we see them just try to get a little bit heavier up front, maybe take the nickel back off the field, maybe play Kilgore even at some safety, and try to match up with kind of that strength and the girth that you were going to see the guys at Kentucky try to lean in on? If Kentucky is in those heavy packages and if they're having success running the football, I think that's an option for South Carolina to go to and something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, Luedecke, I think there's been not enough talk maybe about the fact that he's doubtful. Now, I think you got to remember Brady Hunt, he was doubtful, first injury report on Wednesday going into the Vanderbilt game, and then ultimately was able to make quick progress. So got to see, we're talking here on a Thursday. We'll get another injury report tonight. We'll get one tomorrow. We'll get one on Saturday as well, 90 minutes before the game. You would love if he could play and give you something, right? He has been good. I think right now, Wes, technically, according to PFF, their highest graded defensive player as of right now. Had a great game against Virginia Tech. He has given them a lot, and he's really been their third guy. Got Monkel Goodwine, got Nick Barrett. Those are the starters. He's been in there, played a good many snaps. So now you're looking at the fact if you can't go, that's diminishing your depth at that position, and a position that's going to be key in this game. Maybe more snaps for Troy Pikes to transfer, maybe more snaps for Devontae Miles. The other scholarship guys on the roster have not played yet this year. So I think that's kind of a quietly underrated storyline going into this game.
Yeah, and do you get him do you get a guy like maybe a Demon Clowney in there a little bit more as a run-stopping guy? We shall see. That is certainly something to track. Now, he did come back into the game when he went down against Kentucky. So I'm not giving up on him playing in this game yet. He's got some toughness to him, I think, just by him coming back. So we'll see if that becomes an option. But he was one, and they were already kind of running co-starters there, just like they ran co-starters at linebacker. But we saw them make that subtle move. Hey, I thought Clayton White kind of downplayed it a little bit. Justin Okoronkwo not only entered the starting lineup, Chris, but played the most snaps among linebackers. if you were trying to tweak things, I was saying, hey, maybe Luedecke gets himself a little bit more playing time. Maybe he moves into that starting lineup. Obviously, if he's banged up, that maybe affects that. But you need him in this game. And just to be completely accurate on everything right now, I think I probably said questionable to start. Luedecke, you corrected me, doubtful. Buddy Mack, doubtful. Nolan Hay and Casey Henry, all doubtful. That is as of Wednesday night's report. So you're going to have a Shane Beamer report during call-in show. You'll have the official availability report tonight. You'll have one Friday night and then 90 minutes before kickoff. And then Judge Collier, they said he did some things in practice on Tuesday, Chris. He is currently questionable. And then DQ Smith, currently questionable as well. Questionable by definition means it's a coin flip 50-50. I thought it was interesting, though, Clayton White mentioning with Collier, like, are there maybe some conditioning things where just being out for so long, like even if Collier is back this week, which we'll find out, we'll see, I don't think that necessarily means you're going to roll him out there for 70 plays.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit more of a slow burn. You introduce him back into the football game. But that would help your depth if they are able to get him back into the mix this week. Or, Chris, if he's 90%, you do have a bye week coming up. I think you'll be very careful with these injuries going into this week.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, the bye week's coming at a good time. Real quick, Russ, before we move into keys, I do think we should probably hit on those offensive line injuries, right? Carolina made a tweak going into the Missouri game. Nolan Hay at center, Boaz Stanley over to right guard. They played two more different combinations during the game because of injuries. Nolan Hay goes out. Casey Henry goes out after the first play. Trovon Ball was not a starter, did play some special teams against Missouri, but didn't play out there in terms of just 11-on-11 offense. And so, what does that look like going into this game? And I think you can look at it in two ways. Number one, if you have Henry, he's playing, I think, because he's been your best offensive lineman. But right now, as of the Wednesday report, doubtful. Same thing with Hay. Secondly, do you make any other tweaks that don't have anything to do with injury? Shane Beamer mentioned the other day, hey, he was pretty blunt about this. I told our players and our coaches that if guys aren't getting it done, we can't continue to have them out there not getting it done. Now, he wasn't talking about that, of course, in the context of the O-line. He was talking about the entire team, offense, defense, and special teams. But if you look at one of the positions groups that's had struggles, finding consistency has been the O-line. The problem is your options are now limited if Hay can't go, if Henry can't go. But do we see Tro Ball again? Where does Tree Babalade factor in? Where does R.J. Newsom factor in? Do we even see a Jatavius Shivers inserted into the lineup? This is a position where they got to find some answers, and they could end up being shorthanded this week, depending on how the injury report goes before the game.
Yeah, it just limits your options there. Certainly, I would think and expect if Henry can't go, that's where a Tree will slot in. We'll see what happens elsewhere, man. And, for another just big picture thing here, they brought in a guy like Nick Sharp, who they were, I think, hopeful could come in and compete, maybe even penciled him in for a possible starting job. He had the injury in the spring, has never really seemed to be able to get back to sort of how they envisioned him after that. And kind of one of those things I think that you would say has hurt him, because that was a starter at Wake Forest who on paper you were saying could come in and help replace Torricelli Simpkins or, replace a guy like Kamar Bell there at those guard spots. You're going to have to, frankly, just get better play from some of these guys, man. It is funny, though, on the O-line. It's funny in general how some tweaks, some changes, maybe even not the more talented guy on paper sometimes can come in and play better. I remember some of those Spurrier teams as the year went along, they're inserting walk-on offensive linemen, and all of a sudden it just gelled together.
Seth Edwards, Tank Coleman.
Who knew,
Yeah,
right?
Who knew, and it worked.
It ended up working. So you just never know what little tweak, and that's why you have to kind of keep doing that. They've continued to tweak the rotation at wide receiver. Like I said, linebacker, multiple areas they have continued to tweak. Do we see some of those safeties that played last week continue to play a little bit more? And another thing I was talking about earlier with the possibility of that 3-4 personnel, are there some guys on this defense that could help you to rotate a bit more on defense. It feels to me like the rotation kind of shrunk just a little bit. It was more about, hey, our starters, let's keep them on the field for the most part. When you face an opponent that's staying on the field, you do kind of, even if you, from a conditioning standpoint, are worn down, you're just getting physically kind of, you're crashing into other grown men for a lot of snaps. You know what I'm saying? You're mentally up and down over the course of a game. A little more rotation potentially. That's something Rowland talked about, man. Kentucky's trying to go full on like rotation. You know what I'm saying?
Change.
Yeah, heavy into that aspect of things. So I don't know. Now, of course, if you can reverse this thing and stop the run and get off the field on third downs, we don't even have to have this conversation anymore. So I think, man, you knew what Vandy was somewhat capable of in terms of time of possession, third down, being efficient. You knew what Missouri was capable of. Both of them went in and did it.
Yeah.
Kentucky, you would imagine similar game plan. I will question a little bit more, can Kentucky actually come into your house and do to South Carolina what Missouri did and what Vanderbilt did? I think they will attempt to, but on both sides of the ball, can Kentucky stop the run the way Missouri did? Can they run the football the way either one of those teams did? Even Vanderbilt, though, I still go back. Carolina defended the run in the first half against Vanderbilt incredibly well. It got a little bit they got creased, you would say, in the second half. Even there was actually, weirdly enough, a lot of plays against Missouri where how they say, like, fitted it up. You fitted it up okay. Then you got this just beast of a running back who runs through your tackles.
Yep.
How does that translate against different opponents now, moving forward? How does it translate Saturday night?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think tackling is a big key in this game, in the open field, and that can be receiver, that can be tight end, that can be any quarterback runs, but certainly your mind immediately goes to running back because, especially with McGowan, man, these are two big backs, and McGowan and Dowdell, they can make you pay. And I think we saw too much space for skill position players, whether it's because of a missed tackle or certainly some guys have gotten loose at skill positions for the opposition in the past. So if you're kind of going defensive keys, I mean, that's the biggest one, right? Tackling is going to be huge. Trying to win the line, as you said earlier, I think Kentucky's game plan is going to be to come out, run the football. If you're Carolina, make Cutter Boley beat you. If he beats you, nobody's going to be happy, but it'd be more of a tip your cap situation instead of, okay, for the third week in a row, an opponent played you and did exactly what they wanted to do for the most part. That's what you got to avoid if you're Carolina. I think it sets up a good bit better for you this week in the aspect of these are two very good backs. But I don't think there's an Ahmad Hardy, and then you don't have the added element with the QB run game that both Missouri and Vanderbilt provided. We said it going in, hey, Prabula has not had to run the ball much, but this ability is there. He made some very key runs in that game. And Diego Pavia, of course, made some very key kind of just him being him plays where he's running away from you. It hurt him on the one interception to J.O., but he just had a couple plays that so demoralizing for a defense when you get into that third and long. So can this kid, and I know Justin said he can step up in the pocket maybe better than you expect when you see him. So he's not a statue back there. But he's not, you would assume, going to be Prabula. He's not going to be what Pavia was for Vanderbilt. So can you just, on some of those plays where you have that kind of pass rush win up front, but you don't quite get to the quarterback, are you able to finish those plays? I think it's got to be a key. You got to turn this kid over a bit when you're at home, night game. You have a young quarterback coming in and you're desperate for a win. Could be a tight, maybe defensive-oriented game potentially. You got to turn them over. You got to take advantage, I think, of having a younger quarterback.
Of course, all the other cliches will be important. But if Kentucky takes a similar approach and they say, hey, we're going to zone you off, all eyes on Lenoris, we're going to take away the deep stuff and take away the upfront stuff, and we're going to possibly leave all this space in the middle. Can you hit all those intermediate routes? Can you I think you've got to kind of mini chunk play them to death in this game. Like, let Sellers get going, RPO them, hit those intermediate throws, and then get your B-Rose, your Vandrevius Jacobs guys like that, get them going after the catch. That's another area Kentucky's secondary has struggled a little bit in. So those would be kind of just game flow. This has been a defensive battle most years. Those are the things I'll be keeping a close eye on. Any kind of closing, keys to victory, Chris, or just sort of things to watch in this game for you?
Well, I think offensively we got to, and we're going to say this every week until it gets corrected. Whether or not it gets corrected, I don't know. Maybe we're saying it all year, but Carolina's got to, do a better job in terms of all the procedural stuff. They got to do a better job not going backwards, all the negative plays. There's been some good stuff offensively, particularly in the passing game, which you just hit on, but can you not go backwards so much? Certainly, I think having a semblance of a run game will help with that, but you can't be sitting there in the third quarter of the game and say, okay, Carolina's had 4 false starts and 2 holding penalties, and they've turned the ball over, and they've had, they took a 17-yard sack. Like, those are the types of things that you don't want to see in this game, because in that instance, West Kentucky and their defense, they're going to squeeze down, prevent the big play, keep everything in front of them, and they're going to make life pretty difficult. And, they're going to try to play their game. So I think offensively, we got to talk about all the other stuff, run game and blocking and all that. But for Carolina, can you just start with the baseline of just cleaning this operation up and having it be, the word you used earlier, just more efficient overall? That's what you got to see going into this one.
All right. We picked Missouri last week.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we were right on that one. We both picking Kentucky this week?
I am. Wait, I'm not picking. I thought you were saying South Carolina.
No, I just throw you a curveball. I'm picking South Carolina. I'm assuming you probably are too.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the Gamecocks. I've got a close one again, Wes. 27-20 South Carolina. I think they'll do, enough offensively. I think they'll get a couple key stops defensively. I think there will be some groan-worthy moments, on both sides of the ball. But I think the key is Carolina's done a good job at times this season of getting turnovers, right? There's been some bad defensively, giving up too many yards, being poor on third down. But I'm looking at a young quarterback. When you can get him into some tougher pressure field situations, maybe a turnover or 2 for South Carolina. And I think Carolina does enough offensively to be able to walk out with a win.
Yeah, I've been trying to, in my mind, can South Carolina get to 30 points in this game? Like Beamer pointed it out, typically 24 is like the max for what offenses have scored in this game. Recent years.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean,
it's 31, but that was off of a Nicky.
They had a pick 6 in the game.
Yeah. But I could honestly see I could see a defensive or special team score in this game too. And you're talking about a young quarterback on the other side. Then again, if they have success running the ball, they're not going to put this game on his shoulders. So we'll see. I'm kind of changing my number here on the fly. Give against some odds, give me that South Carolina does score 30. I'm gonna say right at 30. Actually, I'm gonna say Gamecocks win this game 30-21, and that there is a big interception in this, whether it is a pick 6 or a big pick that sets up a score for South Carolina. And guys, I think that you are going to see at some point Bakari Swain break another one this year because teams are kicking to him, or Harbor's going to get one. It's like he takes 3 strides from the end zone and he's at the 25. And I think we're seeing South Carolina be a little bit more aggressive in allowing him to bring kicks out and saying, look, seeing how effortlessly he took it out from 9 yards deep and then almost broke that one. I think it's a situation where you can make opposing coaches sweat a little bit, and knowing the other issues you have, you've got to take a few little extra chances there. Field position has been good. Quell Holman did a good job as kind of the up man. They were kicking away from him. But if you listen to Joe D this week, Joe D. Camilla, special teams coordinator, he was like, man, if they want to sort of drop kick it short and then we take the ball in the 35, we're happy with that.
Yep. You'll say that.
Field position, obviously, if this becomes kind of a defensive battle, always going to be a big thing. So we'll see, guys. All right, that's going to do it for today. Again, appreciate Justin Rowland for hopping on earlier and hanging out with us, giving us some insight on Kentucky. And appreciate all of our great sponsors here on GC Live. Of course, the building we're sitting in right now. Come check out BP Skinner Clothiers right here in the Vista, 1003A Gervais Street. You can't miss it. Fit for game day or fit for a wedding, everything in between. They got you covered. Just come in and say, guys, I need to look great. And they will, if you're not into fashion like me and Chris are not, then they will just take care of you, which is, I think, at a place like this, definitely what you want. So, again, shout out to sponsors and shout out to you for listening or watching this episode of GC Live. For Chris, I am Wes, and we will both see you on Monday.